Hi, hello, welcome back to my channel. My name is Cynthia if you are new here, and I'm so excited because today I get to yap about the Shepherd King Duology. And if you're not familiar, the Shepherd King Duology consists of two books, One Dark Window and Two Twisted Crowns, both written by Rachel Gillig. And honestly, One Dark Window is up there. It is one of my favorite books. It has had me in a chokehold since I read it over a year ago. And if I'm being honest, and maybe slightly a little bit controversial, Ravyn Yew has dethroned any other book boyfriend. Ravyn Yew has also had me in a chokehold for over a year, and I still think about him to this day. So what makes him so special? Let's get into it. But I decided to combine these two because I've been doing a lot of my book reviews separately, but I figured it's a duology. Let's just put them together. But anyway, with all of that being said, if you're not familiar, welcome. This will be no spoilers. And if you are familiar, I would absolutely love to hear your opinion on this duology because I have found that some people loved both books, some people liked one book over the other. I'm definitely in the latter part of the group, which I'll get into a little bit later in the video. But that being said, let's just dive right on in with One Dark Window. But as always, let's start with a summary, and I'm just going to borrow the one from Goodreads. Elspeth is in need of a monster, and the monster might be her. Elspeth Spindle needs far more than luck to stay safe in the eerie, Miss-Laden kingdom of Blunder. She needs a monster. A monster whom she refers to as the Nightmare, an ancient, mercurial, please don't come for me, spirit trapped in her head. He protects her and keeps her secrets, but nothing, especially magic, comes for free. When Elspeth meets a mysterious highwayman on the forest road, her life takes a drastic turn. Thrust into a world of shadow and deception, she joins a dangerous quest to cure Blunder of the dark and unwieldy magic infecting it. And the highwayman? He just so happens to be the king's nephew, captain of the most dangerous men in Blunder, but also guilty of high treason. Together they must collect the 12 Providence cards, the key to unlock the cure. But as their stakes become higher than ever and their undeniable attraction intensifies, Elspeth is forced to face her darkest secret yet. The nightmare is slowly taking over her mind, and she might not be able to stop him. So before I continue on, as I was reading the summary, I realized that even the author kind of jumps around a little bit, and that might be confusing. So to make it really simple, One Dark Window centers on our main character, Elspeth, and she has a monster in her brain, in her head. She calls him the Nightmare. He is also a main character. Our dark, mysterious, treasonous highwayman is none other than Ravyn Yew, and together Elspeth and Ravyn decide to fake date each other in order to find all 12 Providence cards, because the Providence cards, once all collected, will lift the mist over where they live, which is called Blunder. So I hope that made a little bit more sense, and with that all cleared up, let's jump into the plot, because it was interesting. I do just want to warn you, One Dark Window ends on a cliffhanger. I was so unwell after I finished One Dark Window because of the cliffhanger. But if you haven't read these books, Two Twisted Crowns has already published, so you're in luck. You don't have to deal with a cliffhanger and a very big book hangover. You can just dive right into the next one. Very convenient for you. But big cliffhanger aside and me feeling salty about it, I did like the plot of this book. It did feel a little bit predictable. I could tell where Ravyn and Elspeth were going and where they were probably going to end up because I've read the trope before. I'm fairly familiar with the fake dating trope, so I wasn't too shocked. Between the fake dating trope as well as everything else going on in the book, it was kind of predictable. I think the only thing to me that was super unpredictable was the Nightmare, because he definitely is classified as a character and you can't change my mind about that. But I really didn't know what direction the author was going to take when it came to the Nightmare, just because his character was so different. He was very ancient, he was very mysterious. We still didn't know a lot about him. We learned more about him in Two Twisted Crowns, but in One Dark Window there's a lot we don't know, and so it was kind of harder to piece together what would happen with that aspect of the book. And I do also acknowledge that I'm posting this in November and fall is coming to an end and we're starting to get into the cozy winter vibes, but the atmosphere of this book is so just autumn coated. Because Blunder is enveloped in mist, it gives this foggy autumn day kind of vibe. I also think it is fall in the book, I read this book over a year ago, so there are little details like that I just don't remember anymore. But this book is just so perfect for like cold, cozy autumn day of reading. Something I also did like about this book is that the world building was kind of existent because we're in Blunder and we could just kind of stay in Blunder, which was kind of nice because something I've noticed with a lot of fantasy books is that you open the book and there's a map and there's lots of little places on it and it's like I'm supposed to remember this. I'm not someone who ever remembers it, so I'm someone who generally struggles with world building, especially when the worlds in the books are really big and there's a lot of places and a lot of reigns and different elements to remember. And so I actually really liked that in One Dark Window, we were just in Blunder and that was it. And the trees, the riddles. This book was honestly so fun. It scratched like a mental itch I didn't even know that I had. And I hope that makes sense, but that's the best way that I can explain it because honestly, it was a good time. I had a lot of fun. But as important as the plot is and as nice as the plot was, I really want to talk about the characters because I can't say that Ravyn Yew is out here dethroning other book boyfriends and then not talk about him. So let's talk about the characters. So we do have our three main characters, Elsbeth, the Nightmare, and Ravyn Yew. I will also say this book is marketed as YA, but there is a spicy scene, so do with that information what you will. I'm also getting really sick of the publishing industry marketing YA books with spice in them. That's a video for another day. Back on track. Elsbeth as a main character was interesting. There was nothing really wrong with her per se, but she was very anxious, which is justified. She has a monster in her head that probably make me a little anxious too. But there were times where she would completely ruin a moment because she was anxious or overwhelmed or scared. Elspeth is very much in her head in One Dark Window, and annoying as it was at times, I do understand it and I do understand why she was the way she was. And I just wanted to like wrap her up in a hug. I protect Elspeth at all costs. And then there is Ravyn Yew, not the man of the hour, the man of the freaking century. I love his chemistry with Elspeth. I love how protective he is of her. I love that he doesn't treat her like she's this naive, helpless girl and instead empowers her to own who she is and to be who she is. And I think he also helps her. I don't know how to phrase it, but I think he also in a way helps her come out of her shell a little bit more in a way that I don't think she would have had they not developed the relationship that they developed in One Dark Window. But I don't know. I just love Ravyn Yew. I think if I'm gonna gush about Ravyn Yew, I think it's gonna have to be a separate private video because it's going to be really embarrassing. I don't want that on the internet. But to me, he is definitely number one in book boyfriends. And I know that is a very strong statement, but that is the one that I'm making. And I apologize. Hi, hello, editing Cynthia here. I realized that I spent a lot of time saying that I love Ravyn Yew and he's my favorite book boyfriend and he's dethroning other book boyfriends. And then I realized that I never really said why. I explained it in the context of Ravyn and Elspeth, but I never explained it in the context of just Ravyn. So I apologize. So I just wanted to jump in here for a minute and explain to you exactly why I love Ravyn Yew. Reason number one, he is such a flirt and he's very good at it. I very much enjoyed his flirting. Two is that he's not a shadow daddy, which I actually kind of liked. I needed a break, to be honest, from all of the shadow daddy book boyfriends that I had been collecting for however long. And while he is clad in all black and he is kind of like moody, he's not a shadow daddy. He does not wield shadows. And that was kind of refreshing, so to speak. Which leads me into my next point, that he's like off-putting, fruity type, but realistically, he's very much a softie. He's very much a softie. Ravyn looks like he could kill you, probably won't. And Elsbeth doesn't look like she could kill you, but probably will. And my final point for why Ravyn Yew is the best is his protectiveness. I absolutely love how he's willing to go up against even his family to protect the ones he loves. And in this book, there are a lot of cousins. I also didn't really acknowledge that either. There are a lot of characters in this book that are related. And it's not confusing because, like I said, everyone's really fleshed out. But I love that Ravyn is willing to go against one cousin who happens to be the villain to protect his other cousins who are innocent and don't deserve what the villain clearly wants to do to them. And he's not even like Robin Hood martyr kind of type protectiveness. It's genuinely just like, I love this person and they need to be protected, so I'm going to protect them. And I don't know, it just that really resonated with me and I really loved it. So I just wanted to pop in and give you a few reasons because I didn't. And like, if I'm gonna make a statement that bold, I gotta have receipts. So there you go. There are the receipts. But the third main character is the Nightmare who lives in Elsbeth's head. And the Nightmare is really fascinating because he's just this monster in this girl's head, but he has such a strong personality and backstory that I literally could not help classifying him as his own character. He's not a side character. He is a main character. He's sharing main character with Elspeth, and also his attitude and sassiness just gives main character. Love it. I'm here for it. I wasn't sure if I was going to like the Nightmare because the concept felt a little bit more maybe like horror or thriller or just not up my alley, but I ended up really enjoying the Nightmare aspect, and getting to know more of the Nightmare in Two Twisted Crowns was actually kind of fun. We could be friends. But I will also say, in terms of Ravyn and Elspeth, I do like that their romance is secondary to the overall plot of the story. I did also like the side characters. Elsbeth's cousin Ione plays a pretty big role in these two books. I want to say more so in Two Twisted Crowns than One Dark Window, but she was interesting. The other side characters like Ravyn's sister Jesper was really fascinating. I also really liked Ravyn's cousins, and I just really liked a lot of the little dynamics that a lot of the characters have. And I really just felt like the author took the time to flesh out the characters. I genuinely didn't feel like any of the characters were lacking. I genuinely felt like I could see them as children playing when they talked about like their memories, and I could see the embarrassing things and the funny things, and like I felt like there was a real history with these characters versus their cousins. Because sometimes I feel like authors write characters with backstories with good intentions, but they just don't know how to execute, and so it comes off as, yes, these characters are related, but they don't feel like cousins. They read more like friends who've known each other for a year. I started to lose my train of thought there, so I had to pull up my notes. But overall, this book genuinely lives rent-free in my head. I read it in late August of 2023. It's now almost 2025, and I still think about this book. It is very, very good. The characters, the plot, the theme, the atmosphere, I love it all. I ate it up. It has me in a chokehold still to this day. It's a little embarrassing. And funnily enough, the atmosphere of One Dark Window kind of reminds me of the atmosphere in Belladonna by Adeline Grace, which I do actually have 3 videos for each book about. I will link them below up here somewhere, but I really like the atmosphere of this book, and like I said, it's just autumn coated. It is the perfect book to read in the autumn to winter transitional weather. I love the riddles, I love the trees, I love Ravyn and Elspeth, I love their chemistry, I love Ravyn. If I could just erase Elspeth and have him for myself, I absolutely would. But unfortunately, he is fictional, and that's where he will have to remain in the pages of One Dark Window. But anyway, I'm also kind of kicking myself right now because I didn't put a rating on my notes. These are my notes from my blog post, and I didn't put a rating. I'm guessing I gave One Dark Window 4.5 stars out of 5 stars. If not 5 stars out of 5 stars, because I feel like a broken record. I genuinely love this book. If you haven't read this book, please read this book. I want other people to talk about it with. If you have read this book or this series, I would love to hear your thoughts. Were you more of like One Dark Window fan? Were you more of a Two Twisted Crowns fan? Did you like both? Very curious. But for the sake of wrapping up One Dark Window, I'm going to give it 5 stars because I loved it so much and I had so much fun talking about it. But let's move on to Two Twisted Crowns by Rachel Gillig, which is the second book in the Shepherd King Duology. And yes, it is sunset. My lamp just came on. So Two Twisted Crowns. And as always, I'm going to start with a summary for Two Twisted Crowns, which I have borrowed from Goodreads. Thank you, Goodreads. Not sponsored, just borrowing your summaries. Elsbeth and Ravyn have gathered most of the 12 Providence cards, but the most important one has yet to be found, the Twin Alders. If they are going to find it before the solstice and cure the dark magic infecting the kingdom, they will need to journey beyond the dangerous, mist-cloaked forest that surrounds their kingdom. and the only one who can lead them to the twin alders and through the mist is the monster inside Elsbeth's head, the nightmare. I do also want to do like a little asterisk, but wait, that's not it. Because again, with the summary, I feel like it just doesn't really cover the book. Because in Two Twisted Crowns, we kind of shy away from Ravyn and Elspeth. They take a back seat in this book to Elm and Eon. Again, I really struggle with pronouncing her name. I apologize. But Elm and Ion really become the two main characters of this book, which is fine, I guess, but I didn't really like it because it took away from the main plot of the book, which was curing the curse on Blunder and setting everyone free from the mist. But I'm not going to get too into it, so let's get into the plot because then I can start to get more into it. So the plot. Similarly to One Dark Window, Two Twisted... I can't say the title of this book without getting tongue twisted. Two Twisted Crowns is also a very autumn-coated, curl up on like cozy, chilly, rainy day, and just like this book. I love the both of these books. Summary does state we do leave Blunder. It was honestly really fun. It was nice to see other elements and other places of magic and other places that were cursed on the journey to finding the Twin Alders card, which only the Nightmare knows, and he's just as sassy in this book, but we do learn more about him, which was very nice. It also felt like the stakes were much more higher in this book than One Dark Window. We're being introduced to the world and the characters, and we're getting a really good idea of what's going on. And by the end of the book, we have a really good idea of how we should fix it. And in Two Twisted Crowns, we know how to fix it. And now we have to watch the characters do their best to fix it because now there's a deadline. They got to lift the curse by solstice or they're out of luck. Which I thought was interesting. And I liked it. I think it worked. I don't know if it was maybe just like me and my preference. But one thing that I didn't really like was that we switch POVs a lot in this book because now in One Dark Window, the primary point of view was from Elsbeth and the Nightmare. I think we got a little bit of Ravyn thrown in there, but mostly it was Elspeth's point of view. In Two Twisted Crowns, we're getting the Nightmare's point of view, we're getting Ravyn's point of view, we're getting Elm's point of view, and we're getting I'm going to say Ion. We're getting Ion's point of view. There's a lot of POVs and they switch around quite often. And it's just kind of like, oh boy. As soon as we would get something, it would switch to someone else. And I think that was meant to like keep up momentum, I guess, to keep you hooked and like, oh, once we get back to that character's POV, what's going to happen? But to be honest, I found it kind of annoying. Two Twisted Crowns does, however, though, pick up right where One Dark Window left off, which is nice. So there's not really any gaps. The story really moves seamlessly from one book into the next, which is nice. I was reading my notes for my thoughts on the characters for Two Twisted Crowns, and I'm actually just going to keep my phone out because I really like what I wrote. I did start with the multiple POVs, but I just touched on that. Wasn't a fan. Let's move on. And this bit is a little bit spoilery. I'm going to say it's a little bit spoilery, so proceed with caution. But unlike Ravyn and Elsbeth, who have a fake dating trope and there's buildup and there's tension, Elm and Ion have this insta-love and they like trauma bond. And I really just didn't feel their chemistry like I did in One Dark Window with Ravyn and Elsbeth, and that was something that really, really disappointed me because by the end of the book, I liked them, but it was a struggle bus to get to that point. I also didn't really like that Elsbeth felt like she was a secondary character in her own book. And I will say, before anyone comes for me, because I've read all the comments on book reviews and things like that, I do understand that by this point in the book, this is a spoiler, so please skip ahead. But I do understand that by Two Twisted Crowns, the Nightmare has essentially taken over Elspeth's mind. And so Elspeth really isn't even there mentally, and so how can she still be the main character? I get it. I just don't like it. Spoiler is over. But like I mentioned before, we do get to learn a lot more about the Nightmare, and I think in learning more about the Nightmare, we also learn more about the history of Blunder, and we learn more about different family trees in Blunder, and I thought that was really interesting. I enjoyed the little history lesson. I don't know. Again, that could just be me. I will also say the villain from One Dark Window is... my super is outside leaf blowing. All the times he could leaf blow, he has to do it right now. But I feel like I'm competing with a leaf blower. I will also say the villain in One Dark Window does a very good villain in Two Twisted Crowns, and he made the last quarter of the book very, very interesting. And while he was very annoying, I think he served his purpose very well. But like I said, I wasn't too much of a fan of Elm and Ion's romance in this book. Like I mentioned in the very brief, tiny spoiler, it wasn't the same as Ravyn and Elsbeth. Not that it should have been, but it just like, it wasn't as good. The vibes weren't there. And I don't know, it just wasn't for me. I liked them by the end of the book, but getting to that point definitely, definitely took a minute. Overall though, I definitely have a lot more like gripes with Two Twisted Crowns versus One Dark Window. I definitely enjoyed One Dark Window far more than I did Two Twisted Crowns, so I do apologize if you're someone who absolutely loved Two Twisted Crowns, and I love that for you, but it just wasn't up my alley. I just was so invested in Ravyn and Elsbeth that I don't know. But I did end up liking Two Twisted Crowns. I know while I was reading, I was just kind of like, oh, but after I had finished the book, I was like, it wasn't that bad. And I was being a little dramatic, and I did have a good time. And like I said, Elm and Ione did grow on me. I liked the ending of the series. I do kind of wish we got a little bit more Ravyn and Elsbeth at the end of Two Twisted Crowns, just because we went a whole book barely getting anything. We got scraps. So it would have been nice to just have a Ravyn and Elsbeth feast at the end of Two Twisted Crowns to quench our thirst. And like I also mentioned, I really did like the Nightmare story because he's just so fascinating. He's just so fascinating. I loved learning more about him. I loved learning the history and the lore, I guess you could say. It was very fun. And the riddles, I really liked the riddles. They definitely made me feel not super smart, but they were fun nonetheless. And I actually did put my rating in this one. And so One Dark Window gets 5 stars out of 5 stars, and Two Twisted Crowns gets a solid 4.5 stars out of 5 stars. So I definitely had a good time. But overall, I really enjoyed the Shepherd King duology. Like I said before, I'm a little bit more of a fan of the first book than the second book, but that's just personal preference, to be honest. Both books are very good, but I think between tropes and plot and what's happening in each book, you might fall into the camp of liking one book over the other, and that's okay. I also resonated a lot more with Elsbeth than I did with Ione, and so I think also for that reason, I just loved Ravyn and Elsbeth more, and that's okay. But if you haven't read this series, take this as a sign. Take this as your sign to read this series if you're looking for a Christmas gift or a birthday gift for the fantasy reader in your life. These books, they're very fun. I actually do have copies of these books. They're on my shelf. Hold on, let me grab them. Yeah, I actually do have copies of these books. I genuinely loved this series so much that I went to Barnes & Nobles and bought both books. I definitely want to do a reread of One Dark Window because it was, like I said, very good. And my book boyfriend is one of the main characters, and it would be nice to see him again. But overall rating, One Dark Window got 5 out of 5. Two Twisted Crowns got 4.5 out of 5. Honestly, 5 stars out of 5 stars for both books as a series, as a duology, because like I said, I had so much fun. And if you haven't read them, I think you should read them. I definitely recommend them. It's definitely fantasy romance, but the romance is definitely more of a subplot, at least in One Dark Window. I feel like in Two Twisted Crowns, Rachel Gillig kind of cranks it up a little, but I don't blame her, because people be liking the romance, and I sometimes am people, so I don't blame her. They're very fun books. I had such a fun time, and this was honestly so much fun to film because I just love getting to talk about things that I love, which is kind of like, duh. But I'm gonna wrap it up. If you have read these books, please let me know your opinions in the comments. Did you like them? Do you fall into, I like the first or second book over the other book? No judgment, because I liked One Dark Window a lot more than I liked Two Twisted Crowns, so no judgment here. But anyways, I'm gonna stop rambling because I'm definitely starting to ramble. But as always, thank you so much for watching, and I can't wait to see you in the next one. Bye.